Here is the claim. Most people who lose their faith don't lose it in a moment of crisis. They lose it in their mind, weeks before the crisis even peaks. The battlefield isn't circumstance, it's cognition, and Scripture knew this before neuroscience did. Paul didn't call it the helmet of encouragement. He didn't call it the helmet of peace. He called it the helmet of salvation, because what protects your mind is not positive thinking. It's a specific theological reality that you have already been purchased, already been claimed, already been secured. The attack on your mind is almost always an attack on that fact. Here's what nobody tells you. The enemy doesn't need you to renounce God. He just needs you to forget who you are to God. And most people forget quietly, one unchallenged thought at a time. The reframing principle is this: negative thoughts are not neutral weather passing through. They are arguments, and arguments have a target. When hopelessness arrives, it is making a specific claim that your future is determined by what you can see, what you've done, and what you deserve. Self-hatred is an even more precise lie. It tells you that God's assessment of you is identical to your worst assessment of yourself. The helmet of salvation exists to counter that argument not with emotion, but with doctrine. You are not saved because you are worthy. You are saved because He decided. That is the wall your mind is supposed to live behind. The cautionary case is Saul. When the Spirit of the Lord departed, what followed wasn't immediate ruin. It was a slow interior collapse, suspicion, paranoia, rage. Saul never corrected the premise that God had permanently rejected him, so he built his survival strategy on top of that lie. An unprotected mind doesn't just suffer. It makes decisions from its darkest conclusions and calls them realism. Step 1. Identify the specific lie, not just the feeling. The mechanism here is diagnostic precision. Hopelessness is not one thing. It arrives wearing different masks. Nothing will change. I am too far gone. God is done with me. I am the problem that won't be fixed. Each is a distinct theological error. Each requires a distinct counter. Job's counselors failed him not because they were cruel, but because they were imprecise. They saw his suffering and generated a sweeping verdict. You sinned, therefore you suffer. They named a category, divine punishment, and they named it wrong. God's final verdict was that they had not spoken what was right. Emotional conclusions that feel theological are not automatically correct. Job refused to sign their diagnosis even in raw anguish. That refusal was armor. Ask yourself this: what is the specific claim your mind is making right now? Not the feeling, but the actual sentence your hopelessness would speak aloud if it had to. Step 2. Replace the lie with the structure of salvation, not just a verse. The mechanism is architectural. One verse quoted in isolation is easily overwhelmed. What the helmet provides is not a single counterthought, but a structure, a narrative of who you are that is larger than the current moment. Consider Hagar, expelled, depleted, certain that she and her son were finished. She set her child down and walked away because she could not watch him die. She was not struggling with abstract doubt. She was at the absolute perimeter of her identity and her future. God's response wasn't comfort first. It was reorientation. What ails you, Hagar? A question. Then a specific promise about her son's future. She didn't need to feel better. She needed to be reinserted into a story larger than the one despair had written. The helmet doesn't silence the noise. It changes the structure the noise is attacking. Ask yourself this: is your mind operating from the story of your worst moment, or from the full narrative God has declared over you, including what He calls you, what He has secured, where you are ultimately headed? Step 3. Maintain the helmet under sustained attack, not just initial impact. The mechanism is endurance under repetition. The enemy doesn't always strike once and retreat. He repeats, and repetition is designed to make the lie feel like reality through volume and persistence alone. Nehemiah, rebuilding the wall, faced this precisely. The opposition mocked, threatened, accused, and returned. Nehemiah's response was not dramatic spiritual warfare. It was continuity. He kept building. He stationed guards. He refused to come down from the wall to negotiate with voices designed to stop the work. Your mind under sustained self-hatred is the wall. The thoughts demanding you stop, come down, accept the verdict. That is the enemy's voice. The helmet of salvation says, I have a work. I will not come down. Ask yourself this: what thought keeps returning? And have you been treating its persistence as proof that it must be true? Now, the moment most people quit is the third cycle of the same attack. The first time, you resist. The second time, you resist, but you're exhausted. The third time, you begin to wonder if resistance itself is the problem, if the thought keeps returning because it's actually correct. This is the exact moment Scripture records for Elijah under the juniper tree. He had just seen fire fall from heaven. 40 days later, hiding in a cave, asking to die, saying, "I alone am left." The same man, the same God. Completely different mental state. God's response was not rebuke. It was bread, then sleep, then bread again, then a question. What are you doing here? Not accusation, reorientation. You are not too far gone when you are in the cave. The cave may be the last room before your next commissioning. Do not quit in the cave. Now the honest warning. The outcome your mind is fixating on, restored reputation, returned relationship, relief from this specific pain, may not be what God resolves. Jeremiah was faithful and imprisoned. John the Baptist was certain and beheaded. The helmet of salvation does not guarantee the outcome you're picturing. What it guarantees is that your mind does not become the casualty, that you arrive at whatever God ordains with your identity intact, your clarity intact, your sense of who He is intact. That is not a consolation prize. That is the thing everything else depends on. So what do you actually do today? Not tomorrow. Today. First, speak the lie out loud and then speak its counter out loud. Not in your head, out loud. When you externalize the thought and then name what Scripture actually says, you interrupt the loop. I am beyond repair. Counter. He who began a good work in you will complete it. Not as a chant, as a correction. Second, do not make permanent decisions from temporary mental states. When the thought says, give up, walk away, it's over. That is not the moment for a major decision. That is the moment to wait one more day. Third, find one person who knows the real weight of what you're carrying, not to perform vulnerability, but because isolation is how unchallenged thoughts calcify into beliefs. Put the helmet on. Every morning, before the thoughts begin their argument, return to the foundation. I am secured. I am claimed. My mind is not the final authority on my worth or my future. Say it until it is the wall you think from, not the conclusion you're still trying to reach. The morning before Joseph was brought before Pharaoh, he had been in prison for 2 years, since the cupbearer forgot him. He woke up. He did not know what day it was. No sign, no visitation, no indication this morning differed from the 730 before it. And then Pharaoh had a dream. You do not know what morning you are on. You do not know what is already in motion. Protect your mind, not because breakthrough is guaranteed today, but because you cannot afford to have already surrendered it by the time it arrives.